folks that mentor you, and then you get into good situations where people can do that. So that's a very short and somewhat trite comment. I could talk to you about dreams and goals and leaning in and all those sorts of things, and I'm sure those are important. Find your way, but it's important. You got to start with an honest assessment of yourself and your abilities. It's a really good place to start.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And so just to fill in a couple of details of something I know about you that I'm not sure everybody in the audience knows. So you, before we continue on this conversation around the role of CEO and some of the lessons you've learned, you grew up in Southern California, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And your family, you said family of immigrants from where?
Oh, sorry. He's asking leading questions for all of you that don't know how to. Yes, I'm from a Mexican heritage. I was born in Mexico. My brothers and sisters were born here, so we are first, second generation folks. My mom and dad, went to. I was the first one to go to college, but grew up in my mom and dad. They got us out of sort of the east part of LA early on in life, and your environment does have some sense, some direction in how your life leads. So SoCal from really we went from the inner city to the beach area where we kind of grew up, and that was just an environment for us being different at the time, but we didn't know we were different. So we just moved along and did what we needed to do, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I just wanted you to thank you for that, because I wanted you to highlight that, because again, I think, as I'm sure you've seen and encountered in conversation with folks, that so many in our community think that there's a particular path to the CEO role, right? To leadership, frankly, that you need to have a particular background, that you need to come from stuff. And I think far too often in our community, we don't see folks who have a story, anything that sounds like ours. And again, yours sounds, I think, like so many of our current newer generation of our young people that we work with. And so I think, again, that's worth emphasizing, that you took that journey. And I think, again, some of the values that you just mentioned, that you learned from your family and the ways in which you've made decisions and chosen to live your life, I think are really part and parcel of what's allowed you to succeed. Yeah. So speaking of the path and the decisions you've made and choices, are there any mistakes you made or regrets you have that are sort of cautionary tales, maybe for other folks to learn from and to hopefully not fall into the same pitfalls?
Okay, so that's an even longer book.
Love the honesty.
Hey, go ahead.
I said I love the honesty. Yeah.
No, listen, everything you do, we're all doing for the first time sometimes, and especially when you come from, this nature versus nurture debate, and, when you come from a background like a lot of us have, but we didn't have a guiding post just going to college was an accident for me, but there's always someone along the way, as I said before. I think, as I think of regrets, it's always a question people ask. You can't have regrets because it's a hypothetical question. We learn from everything that we didn't do well, and people that were hurt by your regrets don't like that answer, but the answer is simple. It's like so you should look back and learn from it. Mistakes or learnings, there's just so many. Probably one, and I think it applies to a lot of our current generation of folks, because we are so driven, so motivated, have such great aspirations, and it's so wonderful to hear and see where you're going to take our country and our planet, and certainly the Latino cohort. But when I was I was an undergrad finance major at USC. When I went to grad school, you have to take a finance class because this is what everybody has to take one. So I'm a finance grad. It's like I don't need to take a beginning finance class. So after the first class, I go to the teacher and I say, hey, it's quite simple. I'm this hotshot finance guy, and so my thinking is, why don't you let me skip? I'll come back and take the final at the end of the class, and we'll be fine. And he says, oh well, if you want to do it, why don't you just take the final now? And if you pass it, you're gone and you get your credits and you don't have to do that. I'm like, well, I wasn't quite prepared for that answer, but I took the test. And while I passed it, I don't think I passed. I know I didn't pass it with flying colors. It took me a while to get it done. And the professor was great. He taught me this lesson. He said, listen, I hear you. But rather than just skip the entire class, why don't you do this? Let me call you and let me assign certain students who maybe aren't as gifted or have the knowledge and base of this class, and you can sort of be my unofficial TA. And you don't have to come to class, but just help these kids along the way. I learned more about finance. I learned more about myself. I learned more about what I didn't know about that class ever by teaching others. And so
Yeah.
anytime you think you know something, well, open yourself up for an environment. And that was just a really valuable lesson. And so my mistake was thinking I knew it all. And my other mistake was that, there wasn't anything more to learn. I was completely wrong. And I think us as leaders and aspiring leaders, we sometimes come in with lots of information, lots of like, why can't someone do this? I don't understand why we haven't done this yet. I just had a recent conversation with somebody about something in our workplace. It's like, we should just get rid of this and just do this. Seek first to learn and understand before asking others to understand you. Because, people always are doing things for a reason. It may not be a good reason. It may not be the most viable reason, but there's usually a reason why a path is taken. The more you learn about why someone is taking that path, the more you can assist in possibly correcting, if indeed a correction is needed. And so, nobody knows everything. I know we all think that. We don't always all act that way. So that was just a memory from back in the old days.
That's
Marco
awesome.
and I was going to say, Marco and I have talked before, so we have some of these stories. So I tend to come up with new stories because I feel like I've already told them. But that's a good one that you haven't heard before, probably.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great one. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's a really useful insight too, I think, with the lesson taken from it. All right, so then we're going to jump around a little bit. I've got some questions in the different areas. So back up to sort of to the CEO role and some of what it is to walk in those shoes. Can you think of an example of, or more broadly, sort of give, I guess, examples of kind of some of the tougher decisions you make when you're sitting in the CEO chair? I think one of the things about the role, and I certainly have learned it in the last year and a half, right, is that there's a lot of mystery to this idea of being sort of the person in charge, right? Being the ultimate sort of accountable person in the role, right? And so I think there's a lot of mystery around that, and I wonder if you might share a little of insights in terms of like, what are some of the things that were harder for you to wrestle with when you were sitting in that seat, or ways in which you attacked kind of problems to make decisions?
It's funny. I grew up in Southern California and the beach community, so and surfed, and just the communities there. And there's an old saying in the surfing community: if you don't surf, you don't know anything about surfing. The CEO role, while mysterious in a lot of ways, I think it is very different than any other role. The strong number twos that come into it, everybody thinks that they know what to do and the best thing to do. It is that lonely at the top, or people don't really talk. All of those things, they're actually quite true. It's not as somber and as mysterious and as dark, but there are times of crisis, times of the proverbial fork in the road, where you look around and there is nobody else but you. And that everything that rests on that decision and that point, and you have many of those points. Some of them are quiet, some of them are very loud and public. But at the end of the day, there's debates every single day about certain different things. You get good people around you that help coalesce and collaborate and jointly make decisions. But there are just a few things that are all yours, baby. And that's the big difference. And gearing up for that, understanding that it's different, is something that I think the more you learn from others, the more you listen, all of that thing really helps in that regard, because inevitably you have to make a decision with only the resources, only the information in front of you. And again, it's yours all the way.
Yeah. And is there anybody you confide in? Is there anybody you get advice, or at least have a sounding board? Like, speaking of it feels very lonely, but I at least have found that at least being able to even hear myself talk through something with someone who will listen has been helpful. Do you find that too, or no?
Of course, right? I mean, the CEO community, the more you're involved with it, the more you meet people, we all sort of know each other. We call each other privately and quietly in times of crisis. If I know a certain person, if she's gone through something in the news, I will call quietly in the backside. It's like, I think I've got one of those coming. There is no shortage of crises we've had in our business. And so clearly you do that. But again, I can't overemphasize the need for you as a human being to really develop a set of principles, concept around your integrity and what you believe in that are fundamental to you. Because when that crisis comes and there's no one to turn to, you've got to go into that self. And that, back to nature versus nurture. I mean, I was raised in a certain way in the Latino community, and we had a very visible crisis with the dragging of one of our passengers on one of our planes. And the facts behind it was that there was only one United actual employee that was just sitting by and watching, and there was a host of other people involved in another airline and all that sort of thing. And so part of the focus was to, find a way to spin it and, in essence, tell the truth about blaming, in essence, other people, because it wasn't the United family that was involved. And so that decision in the middle of the night and prepping for a TV show early in the morning there was no one there. I physically went on my knees and looked up and said, somebody help me here, because I cannot go on national TV and start pointing fingers. I don't see any value in that. So we went live and said, my fault, my problem. I let policies and procedures get in the way of just good human engagement, and took it all, and took a lot of grief for a short period of time. But then our company moved on. And so I use that example in the sense that there's no one to call in the middle of the night. You just rely on yourself and all the advice you've been given, but you got to get up there and deliver those things. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that's a heady moment in the world of a CEO or anyone that leads an organization. The proverbial buck does stop somewhere, and that tends to be right behind your backside a lot of times.
Yeah. And I think you raise a good point, right? Which is, in my mind, that's a tip and useful for aspiring, shall we say, and even existing CEOs. But also, it's a good tip, I think, for life, right? And this idea of sort of accountability and really building up inner strength, right? And listen to the voice inside your head and make sure that it's giving you good advice, because, like you said, in many ways, sometimes you only have yourself to rely on, to listen to.
Just on to that, because I think you recap it well, but this is back to the concept of knowing yourself. We have the EQ and the IQ side of us, and for most people, one is more dominant than the other. And that's where knowing yourself is important. In the test that I take, it's going to be more balance between both of them. So I have a good understanding of that. But often in life, the people that I find most frustrated in their careers and their lives are people that tend to be more on the analytical side, on the IQ, that can't understand why they haven't reached the pinnacle of their career. And it's often the lack of the EQ side. So how you find to balance that and knowing that about yourself is a good thing, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about the industry, since as you reference it, I think obviously it's really relevant. I think you have insights to share with folks, because I think we're curious to know, right? I think there's a lot of conversation these days around the airline industry, about transportation in general, but sort of in particular in your case, right? The airline industry, sort of, what does it look like 3 years from now, right? What do you think the airlines are doing, should do? What should society be doing to prepare and think about sort of a new reality, right? It's not, as people say, there's never really going to be a quote unquote post-COVID reality, but now that we've sort of entered a new phase, how do you see sort of your space and your field evolving?
Well, in that short a time frame, I'm afraid, unfortunately, that's still in the recovery period, right? We have said from day one that until a vaccine is delivered and operationalized around the world and has mass, I think the lingering effects of people not wanting to be together, to travel, to gather in large spaces is going to continue. So unfortunately, in 3 years, it's still an ongoing recovery. Slowly but surely, things to begin to come in. I think the environment, all of you that are working from home, I think a lot of companies are extending the time that people are going to do that. So everybody's talking about, hey, no one's ever going to work from an office. Everybody's going to work virtually. I don't fundamentally believe that. We're social animals. It's the dynamic for us to engage with other people is needed. So we will get back to those things. Are we going to have CES and the electronics show in Las Vegas, 120,000 people in the next couple of years? Probably not, but 3 or 4 years from now. But your question is about what changes in the marketplace. So it's awful, right? Nobody wants to travel. You've seen all the efforts around cleanliness and safety and communication. If anyone's traveled, you see what's being done at airports. So you'll see that. There's technological changes that are being made. Everything's becoming touchless. And so we're accelerating some of that. We fly 160, 170 million people. We still print out a lot of boarding passes. And we've been wanting to do away with it. You don't really need to do that. But people are resistant, right? It's like, no, I want my paper, right? And so, but this environment, it's like accelerates all that because no one's going to have anything. So how do we do more of that? And we're at United are doing some really exciting things about, just making your life as a customer easier. So you'll do that.
Yeah.
A stop, full stop. And then on a broader, more societal issue, and I still travel quite a bit. I hope this holds, but there's a level of empathy and that's growing with everyone. It's not as much of that, maybe because not many people are working and traveling for business meetings, but it just seems to be a more of a chill environment where, hey, yeah, let's all get, let's get off the plane in the right order. Let's all wear our masks. Let's all be, sit from each other. And so a long time ago when I first started this business, someone asked me what advice I'd give to other people. And I said it then and I'll say it now. It's like, you know what? You could just do a little more caring for the person in front of you because they've got stuff that's important to do. It may not be as important as your stuff is because, of course, that's the way we sometimes think. You know what? Everybody's going to a special event, a special purpose. And so I'm seeing a lot of that in both the people that work at the airport, work on our airline, and importantly, the customers that travel on us. And I hope that's something that persists, over the course of time.
No, that's helpful. That's helpful. I think that's a really good perspective for folks to keep in mind. And I think it's worth mentioning, albeit briefly, I think the other piece I've for some reason spent a fair amount of time trying to sort of track all of these trends. And I think the other piece that I'm not sure folks all think about that, again, I wonder if you would agree or have insights on to add on to, which is, for me, the important thing also that I think folks don't grasp is not just the essential nature of the airline industry, but also like the complexity that comes with it having developed to where it is, such that the support that it needs right now, right? I think that's, again, I think there's not a lot of understanding around sort of the economic packages and the relief and so on. But again, as I've watched some of these shows, I wonder if you'd agree or add something differently. It seems to me, at least, that the piece, again, that people don't understand is literally the thousands upon thousands of folks who are employed, not just by the airline itself, but by the airports, by the baggage handle, right? And the fact that infrastructure is not something that we can afford to sort of shut down and then sort of ramp back, start all over again in the future, right? That it's the kind of thing we have to have, like the airports have to be there and they have to stay, right? The airplanes have to stay functional for when they're needed again. You can't sort of say, we'll start building new ones in 3 years because the timeline, right? And so for me, that seems to be a key piece that I'm not sure folks have really thought about because they only see like, I go, I get on my flight, I get to where I'm going and I'm done, right? And they think it's a simple thing and they only interact with a few people. Whereas it seems like, I don't know if there's a stat. I feel like there's some sort of stat that there's like 400, 500 people involved with each passenger, right? Like to get actually passenger from destination A to B, right?
Yeah, it literally takes a village to get a person in the air, depending on where you are. The number could vary and how many involved. But, it's not about numbers. It is complex. It is an integral part of the economy, period. End of sentence. Is the reason why when we fought for this first CARES Act, why it flew relatively easy, because I think everyone understood all the way up to the President of the United States and all of Senate and all of Congress, that it is for all the reasons you mentioned clearly. Importantly, for all of the people that hear this and don't understand why or use the term bailout, we take great offense at that. The nature of the airline industry, and I'll just take United, our stock had almost doubled. Our future was so bright, it was scary where we were headed. And again, based upon caring for customers, providing flights to where people, all of the things that are right in developing a product. And so we were in a good place. So this happened so quickly and suddenly through no fault of anybody in the airline industry. And because it's an integral part of the economy, that's why the assistance was there and why we're asking for potential assistance again. So we don't have to furlough and let go of so many of these people. Because to your point, Marco, and this is key, you can't just restart an airline. You just don't say tomorrow, okay, there's a flight from New York to it's like it's got to be planned ahead. It's got to be filled. All the 400 to 500 people that service, so all of that has to be done. So keeping sort of the wheels greased is part of this example. In our company, managing costs, but ensuring that everything is greased so we can jump back into the business is the delicate balance we have. I mean, we're burning $30 million a day from burning $120 million a day when it first started. That's burning, meaning we're not making any money. We're burning cash and taking on a lot of debt. So there's a lot of self-help involved. So, but it is a complex business. But you as a customer, you don't have to worry about that. We just want to take care of you. We want to get you there safely. That's all you should know. If you ask, I'll tell you all the other stuff I just told you.
Great. Great. All right. So moving more broadly now to, as you mentioned, sort of the economy, right? I think now in the context of our broader society, I think COVID-19, the social and political activity that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 months, arguably precipitated in great deal by sort of the brutal murder of George Floyd, right, captured on video. But that in my mind, what it really uncovered and surfaced was a deeper conversation we're having in society, certainly about race. But again, combined with COVID, around the economy, around how we are structured as a society, right? How we are as a nation, as a series of communities and one national community. I wonder, what are your thoughts? I know you're involved with lots of business networks like the Business Roundtable, et cetera. What are the conversations you're seeing or hearing around the role of the private sector in society? How is that evolving? How do you? And we've seen lots of statements, but I wanted to get your insights on the nature of sort of business and the private sector with regard to sort of its purpose in society, right? To maybe use that phrase that was offered by the Business Roundtable.
I mean, the question is corporate America, should they be involved? Should they be a driving force in these issues that we face? And the bottom line is, for me anyway, is it better be. We as corporations have the opportunity, and I'd say, frankly, the obligation to play a meaningful role in driving change in our society, because we are society in so many ways. And so what I've seen in my fellow CEOs over the course of not only COVID, but the racial tension and subsequent violence that it's generated is an incredible banding together, incredible dialogue, understanding before we do anything to talk to the people involved, and really opening up the level of conversation that I, at least in my life, haven't seen. And importantly, it's really meaningful and it's really heartfelt by both white allies, people that are trying to create divide between black and brown, and we resist that completely. But there is a really fundamental value. Now, one of my tenets is proof, not promise, and that's going to be a big point, because I always say the righteous anger we see in the minority classes that are participating in these demonstrations, the righteous anger is just for fear that, once again, a deep suspicion that nothing's going to change. Again, that's what's happened for so long. So that's a dialogue that people don't like to hear sometimes, because this isn't just one. I mean, there's many hundreds of Roger Floyd and just everything that's gone on in this world. So really having and seeing CEOs of all different types, from all different industries, really begin to more deeply understand why it's important to do this, and importantly, how best it is to manage and how best to drive things forward. And everyone can do something. And so there's a lot of vehicles. So I've been really pleased and really happy to see sort of my fellow corporate leaders, and all of you would too. You may not see it, you may not hear it. It's not 100%, of course, but it's changing. And again, the proof will be in the pudding. If we wake up here 2 or 3 years from now and it's the same again, we'll have failed. But like I said, companies have the opportunity and the obligation to do something in this space for sure.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And so I'm going to start weaving in some of the questions, or at least some of the themes that we've gotten from some of the Q&A from the audience. I know folks have been submitting things. So let's start talking a little bit about the Latino community, right? Part of the reason we're here at this conference. How do you think either in your case or those of us in the community who are trying to have an impact in the world, in our own communities and really in the broader world, how do you think our heritage, our cultural background, our Latina identity plays into that? Are there strengths that we can leverage? Are there disadvantages from that, given the way society treats us? What are your thoughts? What are you seeing lately in terms of our community?
We are a very collegial cohort, Latinx. It's our nature, right? Familia is everything. Relationships, warmth, and it's one of the wonderful things. Loyalty. But in addition to that, we are the largest growing cohort in American economics and politics. We are incredibly digitally native in so many ways. Our buying power, economic power, represents the eighth largest country or GDP in the world. So we're getting bigger and more impactful in a lot of ways. And we're also beginning to understand that these societal issues that are surround us, we can be part of the solution. And I always say I hate, oh, you're one of the very few Latino. I'm the only Latino in a lot of places. I don't like being the exception. I mean, it should be the expectation of all of us in other places. So how do we drive that? How do we move that forward? And how do we do that in a unique and personal way that is us, right? My leadership style is not what you would see in other people. I connect with people at the very lowest levels. I build trust from underneath, and that is my heritage. That is my my nature and my nurturing that I've grown up in that regard. So I hopefully I represent, as many other people in the minority classes, represent what's best about doing the things that you need to do the way you're naturally do that. Women is the same thing. It's like you don't have to change, and now society and people around you have to begin to slowly accept that people come at it differently. But the more success we have, the more people like myself and yourself and so many others, elected officials, it begins to make a difference. I had probably shouldn't tell this story, but I had in a previous company, a board member walk up to me and said, "Hey, I saw you featured in some article about, Hispanics." And he was laughing. And I said, "Why are you laughing?" And he goes, "Well, it's so funny that we get to take credit for you." Meaning you're not really, you're not really like Hispanic. You're kind of art. It's like, what the hell? But so leading, succeeding, and that is the best way, to further our cause. And for all of you out there, the networking, all of that is very helpful. But the best thing you can do is this concept of know yourself and just deliver. Just constantly deliver, where people look at you and said, they don't think about any color or planet you're from. They think about, that's something that I like working with. He hears me, he helps me, and things get done. That's a meaningful, powerful thing. And that's who we are. And we shouldn't change who we are because some book tells us or something. Just be yourself. And that's back to my original mantra, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think there's a role, or is there any guidance you could give or that we should be giving to corporations to get past some of these barriers, right? To help more of us move up the ranks, to recruit and hire more of us in leadership roles and so on. How do we get more of us into the seats that eventually will lead to the CEO suite?
Listen, it's one of these things where the template and the outline of what you should do, everybody says. The trick is doing it. And the trick is, in my mind, in my opinion, is to do it in the way that fits the culture of your company. So at United, a quick example, a couple of years ago, our senior HR person really came up with a great idea. We do this 9-box thing with high potentials and people that, everybody that can. We took that and just put it against our minority sort of executives in place. So it was a very specific thing. And I can tell you some of the great stories about people that showed up in that box in a certain area that if we had seen them in the broader box, they would have been lost because they didn't necessarily have a specific background for this role that was open. But when we put them in this different box, we just said, well, why the hell not? I mean, she's a smart person. She's pretty capable. She knows these areas. And we've taken those, quote, and this is my word, chances. It sounds kind of like, yeah, but it is a chance. She didn't have it. But because we knew we had isolated her in this special sort of thing. My point is, you don't have to. That was a very simple approach. We found these great people, and it specifically put them in roles that they may not be normally get because there was other people that might be have more specific background, and it's worked out wonderfully. I mean, we have one person. She's had 2 or 3 jobs now since that, and she's like a superstar in our corporation. And it was all because we found her, And the initial conversation about putting in their job was like, ooh, I don't know. She doesn't have this. We don't want her to be unsuccessful. It's like, well, you know what? Let her take the chance. It's like, but of course she did. So I think the advice is isolate and focus. And yes, the training, the sourcing, go to different places. All of that is happening. The trick is you got to get them through the pipeline. And people always, all our careers, there's a place in the middle where people just kind of stop and they don't know what to go and they think going to another company is going to be better and all that. But if we make a vested effort in all minority classes, all capable folks, to isolate them, give them experiences, and take a chance. I mean, I'm a perfect example of people taking a chance from a whole long time ago, and it's been great. And I've done okay, I guess. I'm not sure.
But. Absolutely. Given some of the examples you just mentioned, I wanted to ask for your thoughts on this. So one of the pieces, and I have to sort of own this result. So in putting together these CEO conversations and reaching out to leaders like you, we sort of looked and contacted some of our folks. And one of the things we kind of already knew, but really sort of ran into head on is just in addition to sort of the lack of diversity at the CEO level at Fortune 500 companies around sufficient numbers of Latinos, which is really, really small, we found that the numbers are really small also, and perhaps even smaller for Latinas, right? And for women in general, actually, not even just Latinas. Women are severely underrepresented. And so, again, our CEO cohort ended up resulting where the folks we're talking to this week are all men. And I think that, interestingly, in our community, my experience, the thing that I find a weird disconnect is that my experience, and maybe it's because I come out of the nonprofit world, and so it's a different world than the private sector, but Latinas in particular are the ones who have the most brilliant ideas, the most creative solutions, who have the track record of doing the toughest work and making the tough decisions and so on, right? I mean, I find that in our community, we're making strides in getting past sort of the sexism that has pervaded not just our community, but all communities. And there's a real surge. There's a growing sort of wave of Latinas in our community who are rising to take on and speaking up, frankly, to take on leadership roles. What do you see in the corporate sector? How do we support, particularly sort of for those of us who are men, right? How do we become better allies to the women in our community to help them achieve those roles, given that, again, society somehow continues to put up barriers because we have not made anywhere near the progress we need to?
Yeah. So first, a broad statement about women in general. And I have 5 sisters who probably will watch this, and so if I don't mention them, women are.
My 2 older sisters as well.
I think women are just incredible human beings. The powerful nature of what they can accomplish and do, and the way they do it, it literally could take over the world. But we have these weak norms, and we have the lack of, to your point, male allies. That for so long restricted that. And so I think as many of these instances are helped, having male allies is a very good example. I mean, I was fortunate to have the coaching and counseling and the chancla, the slipper they get on my head every once in a while from my mom, to understand. I mean, I have some very powerful sort of people in my life that are women, and I just see how much energy they have. So what I'm seeing in corporate America is an increasing number of people who aren't thinking about it. It's no longer the first this and first that. Women are rising through the ranks. I know in our company, boy, it's like at one point in time with like 5 or 6 of the most critical roles in the company were held by women. And not because they were women, because they were absolutely the most qualified to do that. And I think, again, back to the concept of, all of us need to do our best, know ourselves, work hard, deliver for others. And people notice, and we get to a point, especially with the growing younger demographic, that in particular is the most, I think, comforting to me, because they're the ones that see less of those things. They see less sex, less color, less where you came from, and they see more, who are you as a person? Are you going to help? So that we even we've invested a lot over the years where the growing generations, I think, are much more accepting. So there's future. But in the interim, we just have to, again, very similar to the concept of minorities, of color and race, I just have to isolate these folks. And it's amazing. I agree with you wholeheartedly about the capability of women, Latinas in particular. I don't know enough about that to warrant that, but I just do know that, I don't know. I'm just not someone that sees color or sex or anything. I just see people and capabilities and an inner spirit that drives someone. And trust me, when you learn to see that and hear that in others, when you develop that yourself, you can get a lot of success.
That's great. That's great. And so a couple of folks have asked, bring it a little bit home. How do you feel United is doing vis-a-vis the Latino community? How are you doing in hiring? I assume you've got an ERG that's active. How are your ranks represented? And how do you feel about how you all are engaging the community? What successes have you found? What examples could you point to that people should know about?
So in the course of my time, we've begun to understand and educate ourselves on the value of the Latino community from a customer base, for instance. Latinos spend $60 billion in the travel industry. $60 billion, that's a B. And so how do we attach them? So at United, we went through a process. We brought some Spanish sort of PR agencies and marketing agencies to help us understand the market and how best to do that. We came up with a tag, Más Unido, more united. And we learned to do things in more of a Spanglish way rather than a focused English only way. Right. And again, that wasn't me driving it. It was our marketing team working with outside forces to understand the value of the cohort, why it's important to address them, and then taking the right actions. And that's critical because someone like me can't force it. We're going to do Spanish marketing. No, it's get the key people that do this for a living to understand the value of it. And so we've done well in that regard. The hiring, the retention, the promotion has been deeply impacted by COVID. We've had to let go of a lot of people. And while our people that have left us, we had been building a really nice pipeline of diversity, not just Hispanic, and we've done that. Our board is represented by 2 Latinos. One of them is me. So, we're doing okay there, but we'll continue to monitor that. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being best, we're a 4 or a 5. And we can do so much more. But there's, importantly, so many other areas and groups of people that you need to do. And that's where all of us developing kind of an open mind about people's capabilities, people's energy, as opposed to, what color they are, is an important thing, because what I worry about is we're gonna over-index. Okay, oh my God, there's a unique pain point for the African American community, so we're gearing that way, rightly so. And then the Latinos are going to come up, and then we have the LGBTQ committee. We have also so many things. So we are becoming a much more accepting society in our younger generation, but that's still some time away. So we're doing okay, United, not great. And I'm the first one to accept that, and we'll continue to sort of focus on that going forward.
Well, I appreciate that sincerity. I think that's a key piece of it, right? Is being able to be honest and accountable. So thank you for that. So we're almost at time. Want to end on a slightly lighter note before we ask if you have any final thoughts. I got a question from the audience that I thought would be great. Given your industry, given your field, you are possibly one of the best people ever to ask. Top 2 or 3 favorite travel destinations that people should see when they get a chance to travel again.
Listen, we have a direct flight from New York to Cape Town, South Africa. Go quickly and you'll stay. It's great. It's just from surfing to wine to great restaurants and great people. It's a really neat community there, and you can do a lot of things in the continent of Africa. That's great. And then probably the second most favorite place, and I think all of us will accept that. It's such a personal thing, right? Where is it that you feel most comfortable coming home to parents, grandparents, to loved ones, to that place that replenishes our spirit and refreshes our outlook on life? That can be anywhere. I want to go to the beach. I want to go skiing. Of course, those are great places. There's a ton of things. Sometimes the more personal places that you can focus on make a bigger difference than just getting a tan or something. So South Africa from a specific place, and more esoteric maybe. Where is home for you? Where's that place that you love to go? And go there. And I am sure and positive that there will be a United flight that takes you there. So sorry for the marketing plug.
Not at all. Not at all. That was fantastic. That's a really great way to think about travel, I think, right? In terms of what fills your soul, as you said, what speaks to you, what fulfills you. So, well, thank you for that. Any final words, any final thoughts and comments to share
Yeah,
with the
I think with
audience?
everyone, yeah, if you don't mind, I just real quick. Um, as all of us go through our career, all of us enter new areas, new departments, new organizations, as we build our career and we want to achieve and we have our goals and missions, um, take a moment to think about the knowing yourself piece that I've talked about. And then once you do, there's a phrase that I started using when we turned United around in a pretty significant way. People ask me how we did that. There's a concept that I just sort of came up with is like listen, learn, and then lead. And then I go back and say, all right, when I say listen, I mean like really, really listen. Like take a lot of time to listen and then go back and forth, not just once, but twice, but 20 times. And the more you listen, and then when you think you've learned, take those learnings back to the people you've listened to and said, I thought I heard you say this, and then see how that changes. And then once you have that together, then you can put the structure. Because what we did at our company is really do that, I think, very well. We came up with the lead portion was you get this. Everybody wants to know. Wall Street wants to know. Everybody wants. What's your big project, Oscar? What's your big initiative? We said we were going to regain the trust of our employees. Because the more you listen and learn, it wasn't about customers, it wasn't about systems, it wasn't about strategy. It was the fact that over so long, we had let our employees down, where they were just frankly tired of always having to say, I'm sorry this doesn't work, I'm sorry our plane is late. So you do that enough to a human being, they disappear. And I would have not learned that by all the mountains of analytical work that our consultants and others have done. I learned that by simple, pure physical connection with folks and gaining their trust and us telling that. So listen, really listen, and learn from that, and only then do you put the lead. And I think all of us could do better for that. So hopefully that's helpful to some of you. And again, thanks for having me, Marco. It's always a treat.
Thank you, Oscar. That was phenomenal. We appreciate all of your time with us and all of the wisdom and the insight. And best of luck to you as you continue to lead in your space, in your industry, and really in our society. So we're looking forward to staying in touch, and have a good afternoon, Oscar. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you, everyone, for being with us today. We hope you've enjoyed the first day of our conference. It's in the books. We've got 4 more exciting days of more plenaries and breakout sessions and a few more CEO conversations. And of course, don't forget our 43rd Annual Awards Gala on Monday, September 21st. Take care, stay safe and healthy, and please do log back in tomorrow morning, bright and early, 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 8:45 a.m. Pacific Time. We'll see you then. Buenas noches.